In the spirit of repentance, I need to share with all of you in this very public setting that over the summer, I, your esteemed rabbi, was involved in some criminal activity. Sorry, Ken. But it is the season of Teshuvah after all, and so I have to be honest, and it is true that I found myself over the course of the summer in a graffiti war. You heard that correctly. But before you think that I was just going around town, spray painting all my favorite Torah verses all over the walls of Hicksville and Jericho, here's the story. I was going to the gym one night after Minyan, Hicksville Commons, the Blink Gym, and I'm walking from my car and I look up and I see, as I'm looking up there, to my shock, to my horror, and to my absolute disgust, graffiti written out, big, bold, angry letters, graffiti, death to the IDF. Death to the IDF. My first reaction is your reaction. I'm angry. I'm furious. They don't know anything, these anti-Semitic pieces of garbage. I spent my whole workout pumping iron and getting angrier and angrier, thinking to myself, I'm going to catch this moron. I'm looking around the gym. Was it him? Was it her? What am I going to do in response? I know I'll cross out the words IDF and I'll make it death to Hamas. No, I'll go one step further. I'm going to write death to Gaza. That'll make them think twice about who they're messing with. And I worked out. I calmed down a little bit. And finally, I said to myself, I'm a rabbi. I got to think clearly here with this graffiti war. And what good is adding more hatred and more anger into this world that already is so broken in so many ways? What good is lowering myself to their level? I have a different plan. So I went to the woman working the front desk at the gym, and I asked her, hey, do you have any stickers? And she handed me a bunch of Blink Fitness branded stickers. Stickers with rainbows on them. Stickers with inspiring, motivational workout quotes. It's all I had to work with in the moment. So I leave the gym, and I'm sweaty, and I'm still angry, and I look around to see if anyone's watching, and quickly I place my stickers over that graffiti, that hateful graffiti, and what was an hour before that hateful message, death to the IDF, was now an entire wall covered in inspiring motivational rainbows. And so over the summer, my fight against anti-Semitism became a rallying cry for both personal fitness and LGBT pride, apparently. Not exactly what I was hoping for, but a lot better. I went home. 2 days later, I come back, and of course, there it was again right next to my stickers. Bolder, stronger, angrier, death to the IDF, and I work out again, and I'm angry, and I calm down again, and I got more stickers, and this time I got a pen, and I crossed it out, and I put Israel's stickers, anything I could find. I came back, I covered it again, and again, 3 times, just like clockwork, there in Hicksville, death to the IDF, the hate returned. The enormity of the hate that we faced this year as a people and continue to face, the reality of our society's quickness to turn away from complexity and discourse and nuance and towards simple-minded violence is overwhelming. And is there anything that I could even say to this person, even if I did catch him, this person who we all know isn't just one person, but who represents thousands or hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions who think just like him or her, death to the IDF. Now, I wanted to respond to them wherever they are, but I couldn't exactly put all my feelings down on the wall next to the gym. And so I wrote what I'm going to share with you this morning, which is a sermon, but it's a sermon in the form of a letter to that anonymous person who hates me and who hates what I believe in as a rabbi and a father and a proud Zionist and a Jew who is caught up alongside everyone sitting here today, all of us thinking about what this last year has meant for the Jewish people, will he or she, my graffiti writing adversary, ever hear these words? I don't know, but you will, and maybe others will too. And unlike graffiti, which is quick and thoughtless and ugly, I pray that these words this morning will help all of us to make some sense of who we are, of where we're going as a people in 5786. So here's what I wrote. To my graffiti writing adversary, we don't know each other, we've never met, and yet our paths have crossed in this odd way, perhaps for a reason, because in this climate of intense extremism, in this world of everyone shouting over each other and graffitiing over each other, wishing violence upon each other, and in some horrific cases like we all saw recently, acting out that violence in this world of so many uninformed opinions and news media narratives on two sides and uneducated, moronic celebrities and influencers spreading their whatever it is online like it's the gospel, in this world of picking sides and each side attacking each other, not just in a war physically, but in a war of words. I hope I can speak to you with compassion, with nuance, from the heart, not as Jew to Muslim, not as a rabbi to an anti-Zionist, but as a neighbor to a neighbor, and as a human being to a fellow human being. To my graffiti writing adversary, as a local rabbi, I lead a community of Jews who have lived through now 2 full years of heartbreak. Our new year begins today, and we continue to count not only months, but days, and not just the days in a single year, but days since October 7th of 2023. That's 717 days, to be precise, since the worst massacre on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Have you seen the videos which Hamas so horrifically displayed for the world to see? Videos not only of the attack itself, but the disgusting propaganda videos that we've all seen over the course of this year, in which our hostages, human beings, mothers and fathers and sons and daughters, have been humiliated and tortured like pawns in their sick game. I know that so many at the anti-Israel protests and rallies and encampments that you attend deny that these atrocities ever even happened, or justify them in some twisted way, or downplay them, or try to silence Jewish voices like our voices have been silenced or minimized so many times throughout history. Like the United Nations, which took so long to even acknowledge the violence, in particular toward women, that occurred on October the 7th, but also at so many film festivals and universities across the United States and Europe, where Israeli filmmakers and artists and speakers and students have been pushed out and shut out and mocked and pushed away from community life. But I assure you, those atrocities happened. Here at our temple in Westbury, we know, because over the course of our year, we heard firsthand from Israeli soldiers who live with PTSD and depression from the unthinkable trauma of these years of war. We've been visited by peaceniks from Kibbutz Be'eri, where almost an entire community, mostly of peace activists, were killed. So many who were just trying to create a better world for you and for us. In our sanctuary here in Westbury, we're reminded every single day of the hostages who remain in your tunnels of hell when we sing Achenu, our prayer which asks God to deliver them me'afela le'ora, from darkness to light. And each time we look up at the sun when we go outside, we remember that they haven't seen it in 717 days. Each time I drop off our young son at our local JCC. I look at the wall where I see the smiling face of Omer Nutra, a young man who lived not more than a few minutes from where you put your hateful graffiti. And I think about his parents picking him up from preschool. And I think about all the memories that they will never share because of your hate. To my graffiti writing adversary, we in the Jewish community are still grieving. Our hearts remain broken, but they are not callous. We know that you carry a pain all your own. We know that you wrote that hateful graffiti, in part because you're angry, in part because you turn on the TV just as we do, and you see images of Palestinian children caught in the crosshairs of this war which should never have been, should never have started. You see as we do children and elders who look like you and speak like you and pray like you, caught in the chaos of this war which should never have been started. And yet there they are, moving from place to place, from tent to tent, from destruction to destruction, from nothingness to nothingness, with nowhere to go, in conditions that are the inevitable result of a war, but nevertheless in conditions that should sicken anyone with a heart. Suffering because of the chaos that Hamas has inflicted upon both of our peoples. After 2 years, too many lives have been lost, too much blood has been spilled, and those of us in the Jewish community with a heart that beats not just for Am Yisrael, but for humanity, we do feel that too, that unbearable heartbreak alongside you. Because our tradition asks us, even in our pain, even in our anger, and yes, even in our fear, to be Rachamim ben Rachamim, the compassionate children of compassionate ancestors. And so when we hear on Rosh HaShanah the broken cries of the shofar, we remember that the death of any innocent and any child anywhere should make us all cry. And we remember what our tradition says, that some years the sound of the shofar is the sound of God crying too. To my graffiti writing adversary, you may not be aware of this, but on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we read from our Torah the story of Abraham and his two children, Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael, you may know, is the biblical figure who's said to be the father of Muhammad and the Muslim nation. And from Abraham's wife Sarah, of course, Isaac, the patriarch of our people, the Jewish people. We read these words on Rosh Hashanah, and those of us who pay attention to them, it's almost unbelievable how these words of thousands of years ago still are our story today. The words of brothers split apart in ways that are painful and sad and heartbreaking. The anger within that family divide in our Torah reading leaves us on this day, our holiest day more than any other, asking the question that rings out from the first words of the Bible when Cain kills his brother Abel in a jealous rage. What went wrong in this world such that there is a force of hate that continues to drive brothers and sisters made in the image of God, human beings made in the image of God, apart? And that question of our Bible, it echoes through our generations and yours. Will there be a day, I ask you, when Ishmael will look Isaac in the eyes and see not an enemy but a brother? Will there be a day, after so many thousands of years of pain, when Ishmael and Isaac together find common bond in their shared father, when they see each other's faces looking back, when they look toward each other? To my graffiti writing adversary, you chant free Palestine, but your chants are uneducated and misguided. You write death to the IDF, but your graffiti is misguided. You see, we are commanded in our Torah to begin with the hope for peace, to begin with the promise and the offer of peace, but then to turn to war when it's necessary, when our lives are at risk. We are commanded to erase the name of Amalek, the name of evil from this world, and that is exactly what Israel has endeavored to do with every ounce of strength, with every ounce of resilience that tiny startup nation of less than 100 years can muster. Israel's survival, Israel's tenacity, when the whole world has turned its back on us, is truly a testament to our strength, the strength of Am Yisrael. But my question to you, why don't you, instead of saying death to the IDF, instead of saying free Palestine, why don't you join us in the fight against true evil? Why are your calls to free Palestine not the calls to free the people of Palestine, the children of Palestine, the suffering masses of Palestine, not from us, but from the ruthless terrorists who rule over them, who brainwash them from a young age, who steal their food, who steal their medicine, who make them into human shields by building bunkers under hospitals and schools and shoot them when they protest? Why are your calls to free Palestine not calls for the people of Gaza to lay down their arms so that we may end this suffering once and for all, however far off that may be, and look toward a future of healing and rebuilding for our children and for yours? Where are your leaders, you who chant free Palestine? We're taught in our tradition not to rejoice in death and martyrdom, but to safeguard life and to cherish life and celebrate human dignity. Where are the progressive imams standing up in the West preaching the message that I'm preaching today? If there are any, where are their voices? Why don't we see them on the news? Why is it that all we seem to hear from that side are accusations of hate leveled against us without solutions other than calling for our annihilation, which is unacceptable? Where is our partner in peace? Why is it that so often the only solution we seem to hear when you take to the streets are more calls for globalizing an intifada, for more violence, for more terror, for death to the IDF? I beg you, acknowledge the sick and perverted reality of extremism in Islam. Call it out with moral force and tenacity. Islam is a great world religion that has too often been twisted. We're not Islamophobic, I hope, any more than we would want anyone to be anti-Semitic. And yet, when we see the glee with which you parade our dead through the streets in celebration, it is a disgrace to Islam, and why more Muslims and pro-Palestinians, and yes, Jewish pro-Palestinians, are scared to condemn that evil, that is something that I don't think I'll ever understand. To my graffiti writing adversary, many of us in the Jewish community have the courage to acknowledge and to admit that we're not immune to our own forms of extremism. That the government in Israel is a democracy, and like all governments, is led by imperfect people. And so this year, like Jacob in the Bible, who wrestled with the angel, we are a people conflicted and a people wrestling with the horrible realities of 2 years of war. We have witnessed this year our own internal debate. Many Israelis are split on whether the war should continue as it is or not. The streets of Tel Aviv have been filled with protest through this year. Members of our community and our families are split on this issue. Many sitting here today will debate my words over the course of your Rosh HaShanah lunches. I know that to be true. Many of our children, the next generation of Jews, are questioning deeply what we once held as an unequivocal support for the Jewish state. And many, sadly, tragically, as a result of these years, are abandoning it altogether, and that is sad. Some that I'm preaching to today are rethinking where their donations go. Some are concerned about the current government in Israel and its motivations. Some feel that the war continues to be a just and a necessary war of self-defense, that we must win at all costs no matter what, while others sitting here today are asking themselves if this truly represents the best of the Jewish spirit, or if our pain and our desire for justice has now plunged the only Jewish nation in the world into a darker place of fighting not for self-defense, but for revenge. Some are asking ourselves if more destruction will solve anything, if more destruction will bring our hostages home, if more destruction will convince a people who hate us to somehow hate us less. And when we heard this year a U.S. representative, Jewish by the way, calling unabashedly, out loud, explicitly to nuke Gaza, or members of the government in Israel calling for the human animals of Gaza to burn, it does hurt the Jewish soul. Not only because it hurts to know that we have become like a pariah on the world stage, and that Jews all over the world, regardless of how they feel, are suffering from that loneliness and that isolation that we've experienced too often as a people, but maybe even more so because so many of us remember Abraham, our shared father, who stood up in Sodom and Gomorrah, the most evil and wicked and darkest place in the entire earth, and even there had the chutzpah to remind God of the preciousness of a single life. To my graffiti writing adversary, we are two peoples, but deep down we are also two brothers. We have both endured too much pain. We each have passed our trauma through the generations. Our tears wet our prayer books. We have a phrase in Yiddish, schwer zu sein a Yid, that it's hard to be a Jew. Well, in this world of too much hate, I think schwer zu sein a Mensch, it's hard to be a human being. It's hard to be so hurt and so broken when we turn on the news every single day and then turn to our world and somehow impossibly turn toward it with compassion and sensitivity and wisdom and maturity rather than anger and hatred. It's hard to understand how after so many generations of war, the promise of our Torah, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, could ever, even after another 1,000 years, be fulfilled. To my graffiti writing adversary, I have a young son who I pray will one day visit the Holy Land. When I drop him off at the JCC for daycare each and every day, we drive by Israeli flags. I see them waving in the distance, and I remember that my love for our people and my love for our land is the foundation of who I am as a human being. I think about thousands of years of Jews who cried to return to our ancestral homeland. I see those flags of blue and white, and I think about the Jews whose families were erased in the Shoah, entire families who desperately needed a safe and secure homeland and didn't have one. I think of all of us who turn when we pray toward Jerusalem, Ir Shalem, the city of peace, with yearning and hope and love and deep connection no matter what. Will there be a day when my son and your son pass each other in the streets of the old city without fear in their eyes? Will there be a day when Ishmael will turn to Isaac and see a brother and not an enemy? I don't have an answer to that question. At the time of writing this letter to you, more and more countries in Europe and throughout the world have officially recognized a Palestinian state, at least diplomatically, with more to follow. I don't know what will be. But I do know that if there has ever been a moment for you and the Arab world to reflect seriously and critically and honestly on the words of Golda Meir from long ago, that peace will come when they love their children more than they hate ours, perhaps this can be that opportunity, perhaps this can be that moment for you to do the teshuvah that needs to be done as a Jew, as a Zionist, as a father who wants a better world for my son. I only know what I can control in my own life, that in this world still of too much hatred and ugliness and extremism and ignorance, like when I saw the graffiti that you wrote on that night when I just wanted to work out, all I can do is call it out and stand against it and share a higher truth and stand for a higher morality to the best of my ability as an imperfect human being too. And I've tried to do that in this letter to you today. To my graffiti writing brother, in our Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, we teach that when the world was created, it shattered into millions of broken pieces, and that our mission in life is to pick up those pieces and put them back together to recreate the world as God intended it to be. Our world is shattered. There is no question about it. Our holy land remains broken and in need of healing as we go into 5786. Broken as it is, we Jews who care will never cease from standing for that land alongside our brothers and sisters and all the many diverse people who call her home. The question that I leave you with, and many like you, who still have too much hate in your hearts, my graffiti writing brother, is will you turn away from your hate after so many years and so many tears to extend a hand to begin picking up the pieces and rebuilding this world as God intended it alongside us. May it be a better year for you, for all of us, and for the land that we both call home. Shana Tova.